Monday is a very big day in Bristol, and it's a big day for the people that own our city. At least some of the people say that. Yeah. We're talking about the merchant venturers, the sons of the morning of Bristol. They shall be going, along with people from their schools that they control, to Bristol Cathedral. I think it's around about lunchtime on Monday for Charter Day. Now, there is a bit of a problem here, Stephen Williams, and that is that this organisation, which has been going really since the wake of the discovery of North America by John Cabot, and they also went right the way through the slave trade. They're now sitting there controlling our schools, or some of them, and almost zero accountability. The fact of the matter is that even you or I, as a journalist or an MP, cannot see their accounts. We cannot see where their money is being invested because it's all under a royal charter. So it's not surprising why some people call them the Bristol Mafia. And there they are at the cathedral, and they book it, and they stop anyone else going in. So if anyone can manage to get in on Monday and let us know what is said and done in the cathedral, it would be very much appreciated, and we'll maybe have a chat to you next week. But anyway, what do you make of the merchant venturers? This is their big outing of the year in their top hats and all that sort of thing. And they will be privately having their little private service booking our cathedral.
Well, I've never been invited along to one of their events or services either. I was first elected in 1993 in Bristol when I was the city's youngest politician at the time, and I came across this phrase, the Bristol Great and Good, which largely meant the merchant venturers, but it also meant quite a few other hangers-on who perhaps didn't have enough money to be admitted into the merchant venturers, but basically had their fingers in all sorts of pies. They were the people who were chairs of governors, they were the people who were magistrates, but what they all had in common was none of them had actually had the guts or decency to stand for election. And whatever people think of politicians of any party, they are people who put themselves forward and ask the public to back them or not. And I think Bristol is quite peculiar in that it has a sort of alternative establishment that isn't elected, isn't accountable, but does control lots of organisations, whether it's school endowments, charitable endowments, almshouses, and manage to find their way onto lots of boards through networking and patronage and what you might actually call nepotism.
They're not here to defend themselves, so I'll try and do that.
I'm sure you won't be able to get them in either.
They would say, well, I have once or twice, occasionally, but last time I tried, they just turned around flat and said no. But I suppose to defend them, I'd say, well, what is the problem with them keeping their accounts secret? Why should their accounts be open to scrutiny? It doesn't really make any difference. Everyone can see, surely, what they do and the charitable gifts they give, and the schools they manage, for example.
I think if they were just a group of men, and they are mainly men, who were just sitting on a trust fund and they were spending it for their own narrow benefit, then you could say, well, by all means, keep it secret. But because they get involved in all sorts of things in Bristol public life, including the running of state-funded academies in South Bristol, the Merchants Academy, for instance, in Withywood, then public life now demands transparency, and transparency, I think, is a great thing. Otherwise, people suspect the worst. Now, I think the modern merchant venturers do a lot of good things in Bristol. They have tried very hard to help certain schools and to raise standards and also to raise aspirations in certain communities, and I think that's to be applauded. But I think more people would be willing to applaud what they do if they were more open.
They have a master, Kevin, every year, a new master of the merchants. They also have a junior warden and a senior warden who are going to be the master next year and the master in 2 years' time. This all sounds a little bit like a Masonic lodge.
It probably is largely a Masonic lodge. But the key thing, even the livery companies in London publish their accounts. There should not be. There are a bunch of associations called the ones with the Royal Charter. That should not be permitted in the modern age. If delivery companies can publish their accounts, so can everybody else.
Well, they would say, wouldn't they, that, the slave trade was a long time ago. We have nothing to do with that anymore.
But they're still living off the benefits, the long-term wealth accumulated from buying and selling slaves.
One of the things Stephen said, Martin, was quite interesting, that you've got these sort of hangers-on to the merchant venturers. That is the people that sort of hang around them, hoping one day that they will be initiated into this. It will be initiated into this club, and then their children and their children's children will never have to work again. They could spend the rest of their lives on golf courses and things like that.
Well, I think Margaret Thatcher was the first woman that was admitted, wasn't she? And I believe they have more women now. I think we did interview the master of the merchant venturers some years ago.
That's right. He came from Bristol Water.
He came in, and that morning he was on the board of Bristol Water, who had just been fined by Ofwat for the most egregious overcharging in the country, and he had a rather torrid time debating with us.
So are you going to take great pleasure with Jeremy Corbyn, Martin?
Can we just finish on what he said, because we can always put a link up to this on our show page later. But he said, what's going to happen with this? He said, well, I'm a lawyer, and we're going to appeal this, and we're going to overturn it, and that's what they did. He was the lawyer that appealed the Ofwat decision and overturned it. So, and of course they were using the money that they made. So is Jeremy Corbyn going to be nationalising Bristol Water? I don't know. In Wales, of course, the water company is a not-for-profit company. In Scotland, Scottish Water is still owned by the Scottish government. So the idea that we should have just private companies running these things, and we've got examples not very far away where that's just not how it works at all. And we've just got used to the idea that this is how things are run. And of course, it's not the case. I mean, in Germany, the railways are owned by the government. They're such an inefficient place, obviously.
So before we leave entirely the supernatural and the merchant venturers going and thanking God every year for all their money and for making sure that they don't have to show us their accounts, which I'll be doing on Monday, I thought we'd have a listen to local journalist Joanna Booth, who is also a little bit concerned about the links between the city and the churches and the faith area of the city. She did a little bit of digging into the mayor. I mean, we're talking about the mayor maybe wanting to become a merchant venturer, Marvin Rees, and his connection to something called the Bethel School of the Supernatural, and someone called I can't remember. We'll hear her name in a minute. But she was the city's faith advisor. So let's have a little listen to this clip from Joanna Booth now, who's on our dialect show next Tuesday.
Evangelical ministry in Redding, California, and what the Freedom of Information request came back with was that the talks and meetings were about US Bristol trade, and Marvin Rees's faith advisor was also involved. She had been at the meetings. One of the meetings was in Washington, and one of the meetings was in London at the St. Erman Hotel, which used to be where the Secret Service met, and they're very close to the House of Commons. It's an interesting hotel.
Okay, so the faith advisor, I mean, one would hope that it was sort of multi-faith element there, because obviously Bristol's got lots of different faiths, and of course none. But so who is this faith advisor, and are they multi-faith or one specific faith?
Well, it's called, I think it was a New Wine Conference in 2018. Marvin Rees introduced Rachel Milano, who was his faith advisor, as his advisor, and he said that she's his link to the Christian churches, the churches. He said, quote, "We call her faith because of the sensitivities." So I haven't seen any evidence of links to other churches or to other religious organizations other than Christian ones. There may be. I haven't researched that part. All I know of it is that she was a link to the Christian churches.
Okay, what about this Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry? Is she linked to that as well, or what? Is she from there?
Yes, turns out that she's a graduate from there. She was part of their 3-year course of becoming a prophet. So the BSSM, shall we call them, the Bethel School of Supernatural.
So this isn't the sort of course you can do at the University of the West of England?
It's not no, well, you can do it in Bristol these days, I believe, but you can't do it at University of Bristol or UWE. It's a course, this one particular, you have to go to California. It's 3 years. Part of it is learning to be a prophet, to heal the sick, to raise the dead, from what I understand, to do things that Jesus would have done, literally.
So that's Joanna Booth there, a local freelance journalist who's also working on the Harbourside campaign down in that part of the city. But Stephen, it's quite an amazing bunch of things that she's discovered about this Rachel Milano, who's the faith advisor. And it seems quite clear that Marvin Rees was saying he wanted to call her the faith advisor because of sensitivities over multi-faith. But surely she should really be a multi-faith advisor if we actually need one, do we?
Well, yes, I mean, that's the point I would make. I'm not sure why the mayor of Bristol or the mayor of the West of England or whoever actually needs a faith advisor. You're a public politician with specific duties, and you shouldn't be bringing your private faith into influencing those duties at all.
What's she doing, sitting in on US-UK trade talks with the mayor?
I've not heard that before. I find that absolutely mind-boggling. Trade talks are a very technical area, and I'm not sure the Bible has much to say about them.
Well, Joanna's got an article up there on medium.com. It says evangelist preacher who thinks homosexuality is a sin is a close friend of Bristol mayor and involved in inverted commas, close friend, and in Bristol US trade talks. So that's Joanna Booth from July this year. Wow. It just seemed like a kind of bizarre thing to be going on in politics, perhaps, Kevin.
Sorry, I mean, she seems to be a faith advisor from one very specific angle in one very specific faith. I thought Bristol, you've said it, but I thought Bristol was a multi-faith city.
What's extraordinary here is that for the last couple of months, one of the biggest issues in Bristol West and in the city centre around the harbour in particular has been the mayor's plans for what he now wants us to call the Western Harbour, but I refuse to do that. Most people know it as the Cumberland Basin, where without warning, he's proposed to slam a 4-lane road through people's houses and businesses, all to deliver land for housing so he can start to meet his housing targets. And that came as a complete shock to people in the community. Other people are outraged that an alternative might be for a bridge further up the gorge, spoiling the world-famous view of the Clifton Suspension Bridge.
That's because he can't build his underground.
yeah. Which is, I don't know why people keep indulging him by talking about that. It is such fantasy politics to think that we're going to get the funding, from whether it's from his friends in Malaysia or anywhere else, to build an underground system in Bristol is complete baloney. But anyway, he does a very real proposals for demolishing the Cumberland Basin roadworks and putting something worse in its place in order to free up the land. And this has been imposed on people who live in Hotwells and Clifton Wood.
It's very easy for you to say this, Stephen, but actually something does need to be done down there. This is a real old road system.
But it works.
The mayor is saying it's got to go.
Well, he's saying it's got to go. No one locally is saying it's got to go. They all think, and I've talked to them, unlike him, that actually it works generally quite well. You could rationalise some of the elevated sections because they were rather wasteful when they put it up in the late 1960s. So you could do something with the existing structure, but that's what he specifically ruled out because it's not transformational, and our mayor likes things to be transformational. But the link I was making to, and I thought this is where you were going, is that he's set up this advisory group supposedly to advise him on how to develop the site that includes people who seem to know nothing about infrastructure, nothing about housing, and nothing about the local community. But what they do have in common, they're either Labour Party friends or they're Christian friends, or both in some cases, including the chairman of this group, John Savage.
Are they speculators, developers, business people?
Well, some of them would, I think, journalists, including Joanna, who I have corresponded with via Twitter, are still trying to find out who they all are. But in generally, the names that I recognise, they're either just Labour hacks or they're Christian friends of Marvin. Nothing against him listening to his Labour friends and his church friends, but to actually appoint them to a board to give them official status when nobody from Hotwells is on that at all is outrageous.
Sounds quite shocking, but we better move on because the Conservatives have launched their general election campaign this week. So I thought we'd better have a little listen to Boris Johnson, who, of course, as you might expect,